My name is Chloe Vance. When I was 25, I spent 4 nights sleeping in the back seat of an old Ford Ranger, less than a 20-minute drive from my biological mother's mansion. 7 years later, the same woman who had once locked the door and refused to let me inside stood in the middle of an elegant restaurant and told everyone that she was the one who had taught me how to succeed. But that night was still a long way off. It all began after a powerful storm swept through Savannah. Rain pounded against the windows for hours, water flooded the basement, and part of the foundation beneath Chloe's apartment building suddenly collapsed. By morning, the police had taped off the building. The tenants were allowed inside for only a few minutes to collect documents, medicine, and essential belongings. Chloe walked out carrying 1 backpack, 2 bags of clothes, and an old laptop. That was her entire life. The landlord returned part of her security deposit, then declared that he was not responsible for natural disasters. The affordable apartments nearby filled up quickly. Every place that still had a vacancy required a good credit score, a large deposit, and proof of steady income. Chloe had none of those things. During the day, she worked part-time as a graphic designer for a small advertising shop. At night, she stood in the sweltering kitchen of a seafood restaurant, washing trays, chopping vegetables, and mopping the floors after closing. She worked with almost no days off, but her student debt still clung to her credit report like an ink stain that could not be erased. That evening, Chloe sat in her truck and stared at her mother's name on the phone screen for a long time. She did not want to call. But outside, the temperature kept falling. The truck had only half a tank of gas left. Chloe understood that pride could not keep a person warm through the night. Eleanor answered after the 4th ring. Soft music and the clinking of glasses drifted through the phone. Chloe could picture her mother's spacious mansion, the cream-colored sofa in the main living room, the polished stone kitchen, and the hallway leading to rooms that were rarely used. Chloe briefly explained that the foundation had collapsed. She said she only needed somewhere to stay for a few weeks until she could find a new place. Eleanor was silent for several seconds. Then she sighed, as though Chloe were the one causing trouble. Your stepfather and I just turned the spare room into a yoga studio. All the equipment has already been set up. Besides, I think it is time for you to learn how to stand on your own. Overcoming adversity is what helps you grow up. Chloe tightened her grip on the phone. She was not asking for money. She was not asking her mother to pay her debts. She was only asking for a door that would not be locked against her. You could just let me sleep on the sofa. Eleanor lowered her voice. Do not make this awkward, Chloe. You are 25 years old. The call ended in less than 3 minutes. Right afterward, Chloe's maternal half-brother sent her a text message. Eleanor had clearly told him what had happened. Why not get a 3rd job? Chloe stared at those words until the screen went dark. No one asked whether she had eaten. No one asked whether the truck had enough gas to keep the heater running. In their eyes, Chloe's hardship was not an accident. It was proof that she had not tried hard enough. On the first night, she parked behind a convenience store that stayed open all night. Chloe curled up on the back seat, used her coat as a blanket, and placed her backpack beneath her head. The cab smelled of damp fabric, engine oil, and old food. Whenever she heard footsteps pass by, she opened her eyes, held her breath, and placed one hand on the door lock. On the second night, a security guard knocked on the window and told her to leave. On the third night, she woke up because her feet had gone numb. By the fourth night, Chloe had stopped crying. She sat behind the steering wheel, staring at the lights from distant houses, and understood a truth colder than a Georgia winter. A person could have a mother, a brother, and an entire family on paper, yet still have absolutely nowhere to go home to. Chloe did not know that the following morning, a message from Brunswick would change her entire life. She also had no idea that the person who sent it would one day become the only name listed on the most valuable property Chloe would ever build. Her phone lit up in the darkness. Chloe, I heard you were having a hard time. Come to Brunswick and stay with me right now. Aunt Vivian's message arrived just as Chloe had nearly convinced herself that no one in the world cared whether she was alive or had simply disappeared. Less than 2 hours later, the old Ford Ranger left Savannah beneath a gray haze. Chloe drove toward Brunswick with eyes burning from lack of sleep, hands stiff with cold around the steering wheel, and just enough money in her wallet to pay for gas. She did not know how long she would stay. She did not know how to explain the 4 nights she had just survived. She only knew that Vivian had said something no other relative had said. "Come here and stay with me right now." Vivian's house stood at the end of a narrow road near the coastal marshes. It was not large. The white paint had peeled away at several corners, and the wooden fence out front leaned slightly after many rainy seasons. But the moment Chloe turned off the engine, the front door opened. Vivian stood on the porch in an old sweater, her hair hastily tied into a bun at the back of her head. She looked at the truck filled with bags of clothes, then at Chloe's pale face, and finally at her mud-stained shoes. She did not ask why Eleanor had refused to help. She did not ask what Chloe had done with her money. She did not ask what Chloe had done to make her life fall apart. Vivian simply walked down the steps, wrapped her arms around her niece, and spoke softly. "Come inside, sweetheart. It is freezing out here." In the kitchen, a pot of seafood soup simmered gently on the stove. The smell of shrimp, celery, and black pepper filled the small room. Vivian placed a full bowl in front of Chloe, added 2 slices of toast, then pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Eat first, sweetheart. We can figure out everything else later." Chloe held the spoon but could not lift it to her mouth. Her throat tightened. For 4 days, she had kept telling herself that she could not be weak. She could not cry in the truck. She could not let her coworkers find out that she had nowhere to live. But in front of one bowl of hot soup, every defense she had built suddenly collapsed. Vivian did not comfort her with grand speeches. She simply slid the box of tissues across the table and sat quietly. The room prepared for Chloe was at the end of the hallway. It was so small that it held only a single bed, a low dresser, and a table beside the window. The blankets had been freshly washed. On the pillow rested a lavender sachet that Vivian had sewn herself. The scent of pine from the floorboards made Chloe feel, for the first time in many nights, that she could close her eyes without keeping one hand on the door lock. Vivian made a living embroidering handkerchiefs, creating floral arrangements, and taking small orders for local weddings. Her income was not steady. Some months, she had to calculate every electric bill carefully, but she never used her own hardship to make Chloe feel indebted to her. 2 weeks later, when Chloe began searching for work in Brunswick, Vivian took her to an old woodworking shop near the river dock. The owner was Arthur, a thin man in his 70s with a slightly stooped back and hands covered in small scars. He wore a faded shirt, spoke very little, and showed no sign of being impressed when he learned that Chloe had worked as a graphic designer. "I do not need someone who makes art on a screen," he said. "I need someone who measures correctly, writes things down correctly, and does not quit halfway through the job." Chloe needed the money, so she accepted. During her first few days, she did nothing more than enter orders, organize invoices, and turn Arthur's hand-drawn sketches into digital plans. She assumed it was only a temporary job. But every afternoon, when sunlight slanted through the workshop doors, Chloe often stopped to watch Arthur work. Under his hands, rough boards covered in dead knots and cracks slowly became dining tables, bookcases, and armchairs with lines so solid that people wanted to reach out and touch them. He did not hide the flaws in the wood. He turned them into its most striking features. One day, Chloe pointed to a walnut board with a long crack running through it and asked why he did not throw it away. Arthur looked at her for a long moment. A crack does not mean the wood is ruined. An impatient person sees something that should be discarded. A skilled person sees something that has not been finished yet. His words left Chloe silent. Arthur knew nothing about the nights she had spent in the truck. He did not know that her mother had once refused to give her a place on the sofa. But without realizing it, he had named the exact wound Chloe had always tried to hide. From that day forward, she began staying after work. She learned how to identify different types of wood by their scent, how to read the direction of the grain, and how to keep a hand plane from slipping away from the cut line. Arthur was strict. He made Chloe redo the same joint again and again because the error was narrower than a fingernail, but he never looked down on her. Several months later, Chloe discovered that the elderly craftsman, many people in town dismissed as a difficult old man, had once built furniture for major hotels, historic mansions, and wealthy families throughout Georgia. He had refused to expand the workshop because he did not want to turn craftsmanship into an assembly line. Arthur was not lacking recognition. He was only missing someone patient enough to inherit everything he knew. And the person he chose was the young woman whose own family had once decided that she was incapable of taking care of herself. Arthur did not give Chloe a future with a large check or an easy promise. He gave her a key to the workshop, a set of tools with worn handles, and years that forced her to learn how to begin again every time she failed. During the day, Chloe worked at the shop. At night, she studied interior design at a community college. Some evenings, she returned to Vivian's house after midnight, her hands burning from sanding and her eyes red after hours of staring at digital blueprints. Vivian always left a plate of food in the oven. She never asked Chloe when she was finally going to succeed. She only asked whether Chloe needed coffee to take with her the next morning. Arthur did not go easier on Chloe because she was a young woman. He made her learn from the smallest tasks, how to choose a board that was not damp inside, how to measure twice before cutting, and how to recognize a crooked table simply by placing her palm on its surface. Once, Chloe ruined an expensive cherrywood board by cutting it at the wrong angle. She stood frozen, thinking about how many weeks she would have to work to repay the loss. Arthur did not shout. He simply placed the damaged wood on the table and said, "A mistake will not cost you your craft. Hiding the mistake will." Chloe carried those words with her. 3 years after she arrived in Brunswick, Arthur began to grow weaker. His coughing spells lasted longer. His hands trembled slightly whenever he held a chisel. Still, he refused to stop working until one morning, when Chloe found him sitting motionless in front of a table he had not finished. Arthur died in his sleep a few days later. The workshop became so quiet that Chloe felt she could hear dust settling on the concrete floor. She assumed the place would be sold. Arthur had no wife or children, and his distant relatives appeared only to ask how much the land was worth. But during the reading of his will, the attorney placed a small metal box in front of Chloe. Inside were the workshop key and documents transferring all of Arthur's woodworking tools to her. Arthur did not leave her the land. He did not have enough wealth to make Chloe rich. What he left behind were hand planes, old saws, workbenches, blueprints, and the stamp bearing his name that he had used for more than 40 years. With them was a note written in his firm handwriting: "Do not turn the workshop into a museum. Make something better than anything I ever made." Chloe cried for the first time since Arthur's death. She understood that he had not merely left her his tools. He had recognized her as his successor. At 27, Chloe used all her savings, sold the old Ford Ranger, and took out a small loan to rent a warehouse near the port of Brunswick. She named the brand after her own family name, even though the Vance family had once treated her like a burden. In the first month, she received only 3 orders. In the second month, a customer canceled his contract after learning that a young woman would be building the furniture herself. One supplier even asked whether she needed to call her husband so he could decide which type of wood to use. Chloe did not argue. She sent the plans, the price quote, and photographs of her completed work. 6 months later, the same customer who had canceled returned and asked her to create all the furniture for his coastal vacation home. Chloe hired more craftsmen, but every important piece still passed through her hands. She inspected every joint, every layer of finish, and every edge. From the age of 27 to 32, thick calluses formed across her palms. Her hair often carried the smell of wood oil. Some nights, she slept on the office sofa, just to meet a delivery deadline the following morning. Then, an architect in Atlanta featured photographs of a dining set Chloe had designed in a trade magazine. The workshop phone began ringing constantly. Contracts from Savannah, Atlanta, and coastal resorts arrived one after another. People stopped calling her Arthur's young apprentice. They called her the founder of one of the most sought-after handcrafted furniture brands on the Georgia coast. Chloe's first major profit was enough to buy herself a luxurious home. But she did not. For months, she quietly searched for a piece of land along the Brunswick riverfront. It was a place where Vivian had often stopped for a long time whenever the two of them passed by. Vivian had once said that she dreamed of owning a small wooden house with her embroidery displayed in the front and a tea table in the back overlooking the water. She had said it only once. Chloe remembered it for 7 years. She purchased the property under the name of a separate company, designed every room herself, and selected the most trustworthy builders she knew. Half of the building would serve as a workshop and furniture showroom. The other half was reserved for Vivian's embroidery, handmade floral pieces, and a tea corner of her own. For 6 months, Chloe kept everything secret. Vivian believed her niece was completing a commission for a wealthy client. Eleanor also heard that Chloe's company was thriving and began calling more often. She asked about the company's revenue, its clients in Atlanta, and even suggested that the family should hold a party to celebrate. Eleanor did not know that Chloe had already planned that party. But she was not the person being honored. 7 years earlier, Eleanor had refused to let Chloe sleep on the sofa in a mansion filled with unused rooms. Tonight, she walked into Savannah's most elegant restaurant convinced that her daughter had organized the dinner to thank her. Eleanor wore a pearl-colored dress, walked beside her second husband, and smiled at everyone in the room. She proudly introduced herself as Chloe Vance's mother, as though she had stood beside her daughter through every difficult day. Vivian arrived a few minutes later. She wore the old coat she saved for important occasions, and small scratches from embroidery needles were still visible on her hands. When she saw the private dining room decorated with sprigs of lavender, she quietly asked Chloe why she had arranged something so elaborate. Chloe only smiled. Tonight, she would understand. Dinner began with congratulations for Chloe's furniture brand. An architect from Atlanta raised his glass and mentioned the new contract with a chain of coastal hotels. Another client said he had waited nearly a year for a dining set designed by Chloe herself. Eleanor sat a little straighter after every compliment. When someone asked where Chloe had found the strength to start again from nothing, Eleanor spoke before her daughter could answer. "I always knew Chloe was strong. Back then, I deliberately chose not to help her too much because I wanted her to learn how to stand on her own. Perhaps that pressure is what created the success we see today." The room fell silent. Vivian lowered her eyes to the table. She remembered clearly the morning Chloe had arrived in Brunswick with a pale face, cracked lips, and 2 bags of clothes hurriedly stuffed into the back of her truck. Chloe looked at her mother. Eleanor was still smiling, completely convinced that everyone would accept the story she had just told. Chloe set down her glass. "My motivation did not come from being abandoned." Her voice was not loud, but it was enough to freeze the smile on Eleanor's face. "I survived those nights because I had no other choice. But I built everything I have today because someone gave me a place to sleep, a hot bowl of soup, and the feeling that I was still worthy of being loved." Eleanor glanced quickly at the guests around her. "I only wanted what was best for you." Chloe nodded. "What is best for someone who has no home is not a lesson. It is an open door." No one said another word. Chloe stood and walked to a small cabinet at the far end of the room. She took out a dark wooden box she had made with her own hands. Delicate, deeply carved sprigs of lavender covered the lid. She placed it in front of Vivian. Vivian's hands trembled as she touched the box. "It took me almost 3 months to finish this carving," Chloe said. "But the real gift is inside." Vivian opened the lid. Inside was a brass key and a set of documents tied with a purple ribbon. She read the first line, then stopped. Her eyes moved from the page to Chloe as though she could not understand the words in front of her. The property deed bore the name Vivian Vance. Chloe picked up a tablet and played a video of the building along the Brunswick riverfront. A spacious wooden structure with large glass windows appeared on the screen. At the front was a showroom for handcrafted furniture. A separate area had been designed for embroidery and artistic floral arrangements. At the back was a wooden porch overlooking the water with a small tea table beneath a flowering trellis. Vivian covered her mouth with one hand. "You bought this place?" "No," Chloe replied. "I bought it for you." Vivian shook her head again and again. "I cannot accept this. It is too much. You gave me something greater. When I had nowhere to go, you gave me a home without asking how I would ever repay you." Vivian burst into tears. Chloe walked over and wrapped her arms around her, just as Vivian had embraced her on the porch on that cold morning 7 years earlier. Across the table, Eleanor stared at the documents bearing her sister-in-law's name. She understood that this gift was more than an expensive building. It was a declaration of who truly belonged in Chloe's family. Eleanor quietly said that she had also sacrificed a great deal for her daughter, but this time, no one rushed to comfort her. Chloe turned back to her mother. "You chose to keep the empty room. Aunt Vivian chose to open her door. Those choices decided where each of you stands in my life today." She did not say it in anger. She simply told the truth. That night, Vivian left the restaurant clutching the key tightly in her hand. Eleanor walked outside in silence, understanding for the first time that Chloe's success did not prove she had been right. It proved that Chloe had grown despite everything she had done. And along the Brunswick riverfront, the lights came on inside the new wooden building. The sign out front carried only one name: Vivian Vance. Family is not always defined by blood. Sometimes it is the person who opens the door when everyone else turns away. If someone once supported you when you had nowhere else to go, honor them in the comments by writing, "They showed up." And tell us, did Chloe make the right choice by giving everything to Vivian, or should Eleanor have been given another chance? Share your opinion below. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more powerful stories about family, betrayal, gratitude, and the choices that shape our lives.